BSides DC would like to thank all of our sponsors, and a special thank you to all of our speakers, volunteers, and organizers.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thanks for coming to my talk. We're going to talk about I am, what I am, and that's what I am. It's one of the Popeye's saying. I hope people remember Popeye. Some of my students at the university don't even know who Van Halen is, so talking about Popeye is like, oh, that's an old stuff. So here's a little who am I. So I just pulled it from my password file. I'm from Guatemala. I worked for 25 years in Honduras, and now I've been living and working here in DC since late 2017. I started working in security first as a sysadmin, and then I just read Cliff Stoll's book, The Cuckoo's Egg, and then compiled Satan. Maybe somebody remembers that package. I compiled it and then just fell into the rabbit hole into security. I've done some forensics, some pen testing, got some Mexican rats, which I reverse engineered back in the day, done business continuity and disaster recovery. And I've also taught at the universities in Central America, the operating system and compilers, and the compilers engineering course. So I know how to, like my superpowers, I know how to exit VI, and I know how to write regular expressions, so yeah. Well, just a standard disclaimer, this is a presentation of my views, mine only, and they do not represent any past, future, or present employer. So these are things that I learned and for doing the current job that I have, so, but it also reflects on my past experiences. And so what is this talk about? This is not about Amazon IAM, so I'm sorry if I baited you somewhat, if you thought it was about Amazon IAM. This is not. This is about the identity and access management process, actually, which is, I got two definitions here. One from ISO 27001, which is to ensure that only authorized users get access to the applications and systems and services, or from ITIL to process and to work on the provision of changing and revoking access rights to authorized users only. So those are like the book definitions. So that's what we want to talk about. And I felt compelled to give this talk because I saw a tweet, somebody asking, how do people in their organizations do access provisioning? How do you create new users? And I thought, well, actually identity and access management is a pretty cool defensive capability. I mean, it's something that if you focus this in a enterprise or workforce setting, giving access to users is a process that somehow gets neglected. People leave all the identities on the network, on the Active Directory, whatever. And that, I think that managing that gives you a whole foot on the door on defensive capabilities. I won't be discussing any commercial products. And I won't, of course, this is not a live coding or exploit hacking talk, so we're just going to discuss about this process. So actually, as I mentioned, this is a supporting process for defense or protection of the enterprise or your product services. Here's a couple of headlines that I got from the internet. A guy who was kicked out of a company and deleted all the servers in Amazon, rogue system administration who shut down servers, and also some leftover identities have been used to compromise networks because they use passwords that were found in password dumps, old identities. So killing off all the identities from the network, from the Active Directory or for the directory is a very useful process. There's another thing, for example, a case I saw at a university. The university allowed self-service registration of email accounts. So there was some cool student who created a registrar at UNI, at the university.edu. So when I saw that, because I took the roll call for giving the The grades, I saw, why is this guy's address registrar? I mean, he's just a regular guy. So I asked him, and he just could register, people could just register whatever email address, and that tied into the other systems of the university. So that was a big vulnerability, which got fixed. And this also creates the issue of separation between, okay, you're providing services for your customers or your students, somebody external to the organization, but then you have the same domain or the same credentials that go into the payroll system, for example. So you have to segregate and create a barrier or some way to differentiate what services are being provided for the external users and which ones for the internal users. So we've heard that information security is a process, it is not a tool. So this is what this talk is about, actually talking about why provisioning identities and users giving access to applications is actually a process that you have to build on top of some tools. And we're going to see what kind of tools. So that way you can begin, to create a secure environment, but also to measure and improve and also create more visibility into the risks that you may have into your security process. It will also create a way to, as a upper level, to give you segregation of duties. Should this developer have access to production, to the cash management system, for example? Should this user who processes payments have also access to change the payroll? This is a segregation of duties issue, which also is made visible when you implement an identity and access management process. A process is usually written like this. This is one I found in the internet. Where you make a flow chart and you describe what actions and decisions you take when you create a user. So that's what we're going to talk about. And also incorporate these patterns. Some of the patterns that we encounter when implementing identity and access management are these: the joiner, when people come into the organization; the mover, when somebody transfers from one duty station to another. They change jobs, but within the organization, so they need different permission. Somebody goes from accounting to HR to services to IT. They need to be there needs to be some way to notify and understand what happens when people change jobs within the organization. So that's like a mover process. Also the leaver, when somebody leaves the organization, you need to do something, delete identities, cancel passwords, move the email address to other place. Also understand what is the birthright access, what do you need to give your users when they just come into the organization, and also the term of recertification. That's a periodic process that you do to ensure that users have the access they require. So if I gave you access to the accounting system 2 years ago, do you still need it today? That's something that you have to be recertifying constantly to understand, like a secondary control of what these accesses mean for the organization. And those patterns are implemented into these lifecycle events. This lifecycle, when you create a user, you onboard them, then you request access to other applications beyond what's the birthright. Then you manage them when you transfer, when you offboard them, when they leave the organization. But a frequent issue is people who get rehired into the organization. They leave and they come back. So you need to be reviewing that and recertifying the access periodically. So that's a constant circle or cycle, a constant cycle of events that you're going to be doing when managing identities and accesses on this level. It is also a large project. It's something that you gotta plan for. You gotta design what is the scope, how are you gonna do the governance on this, who's gonna be responsible for even deciding how are you gonna write user identities. Is it gonna be first initial last name? Is it gonna be first name dot last name? Is it gonna be, that kind of thing has to be designed and governed. Then you design an architecture, how you're gonna implement those processes, and then you go and create permissions catalogs for each of applications, and implement a tool for doing that. But you can still be doing processes that do not require specific tools for that. So to understand what this identity and access management landscape can be, I created an alignment table for this. So I give you like a bingo card. The center one is free. Roll your own. You create your own identity and access management fully ad hoc to your organization. But then we can see, for example, for the lawful good, you can implement a research firm vetted solution, something that's on a quadrant or wave, you know, that's lawful good. You can implement an open source solution, which is neutral good. Or you can implement a new product from a startup that nobody knows, and that's chaotic good. You can be neutral by implementing IAM, or Identity and Access Management, on a ticketing app. You do Jira's or ServiceNow or any ticketing app. Chaotic neutral, maybe outsourcing it to a social login, like Facebook, Google, or Yahoo login. I don't know. Lawful evil, of course, paper-based forms. I mean, that's like way back, huh? Neutral evil, you write your own LDAP, direct LDAP editing scripts, and that's like the BOFH comic strip. I mean, like something like guy doing scripts and creating users with scripts. And chaotic evil, for me, it's doing all through email, which is hard to follow, hard to understand what's happening, and you do not get a complete picture. So this is something that I thought I'd create for you to understand what identity and access management can mean over a large panorama, a landscape of options. And with that, you will implement an architecture. You will need some way of creating the system of record. Who's going to be your master source of data that's going to be giving you identities? Is it going to be the payroll system? Is it going to be the HR system? Is it going to be the email directory? Is it going to be Active Directory? Well, maybe no. Active Directory is a bad idea. It's got to be something official, something that the company or the organization says these are the official users that we have to have here. Then in the middle you have the EIM service, so that's the tool or application that you have, which is also connected to external identity system or record. This is federation. I mean, that's like when connecting to cloud-based services. Some authentication provider, if you want to give MFA, you have many issues. The federated services, as I said. The EIM services usually implement connectors or interfaces or APIs into some applications. And then those connectors actually manage the database, the network, provisioning the database, whatever. Those are managed or controlled by the EIM application or service complete. Some other complementary issues around identity and access management. This is something that's coming. For example, the MFA provisioning. Are you giving your users something like MFA, Azure AD MFA, or Google Authenticator, whatever? You need to provision those also. Yeah. You also have to think about privileged user access management. How are you going to differentiate normal users from users who have privileged database administrators, system administrators, server administrators, network? How are you going to provide a separated or segregated view of those who have more privilege, so that you may do something like risk scoring, saying, okay, this system administrator has admin permissions over a server that contains the payroll. What's that? Does that give me, does that increase the risk? He's going to be, of course, a better target for phishing or hijacking of his account. And you can also tie identity and access management into physical access. Badges, for example. You can provision badges What badge are you going to be, and that requires an integration into the physical security system of the building, for example, to provide physical access. But it's not all technology, because actually the identity and access management is mostly business driven. You must align to your hiring process, how the company moves, what's the rotation. For example, there are some government entities which hire people for 1 week and then they send them to another post and rehire them in another post. There's a lot of rotation. What happens when a contract expires but gets renewed? How fast? How soon? How soon are you rehiring people? Do you hire people who only need some kind of a specific access, only email, but they don't need to access the network? Or only network but no email, like security guards, for example, or for time stamping, they sometimes give network access only. And also for temporary or seasonal access, how are you going to manage the access to the, for example, to the POS for people who only come here for working for the Halloween or for the holidays? So that's something that your process has to take into account and also move and align at the speed of what the business needs. And I also mentioned robots. This is something that's coming. I mean, the robots are coming. Many companies are implementing robotic process automation. And one of the issues with robotic process automation is that since their robots are about the current technology for robotic process automation is about impersonating an actual user and interacting with the applications that the company has, you need to provision identities for those robots too. And those are unattended identities, yet they are not service accounts. They are like a normal user accounts, and they are dependent on on the application or the end application security also. So you have to provision those robots not only in the network or Active Directory, but also you also have to provision them into the actual applications that the robots are working on. The robots may be started ephemerally. I mean, some companies start 500 robots in the morning to do some transaction processing that's needed, and then they shut them down in the evening. And they want or they need that the password gets rotated and changed because those identities are not attended. So nobody's going to know if you're using your password or whatever. And you need to design governance around robots, so robot identities. The company has to understand that you need to design how are you going to work with those identities, how are you going to give them access, and also how are you're going to be assigning them, who can request a robot identity, for example. There's a flip side to the robots. The IAM process can use the robots also to deprovision applications. So, I mean, robots can also work for you for security purposes. So, that's a cool example. Work with legacy or old applications, black screen, glass screen, green screen applications. A robot can type and remove users from applications or servers that are not integrated into this new services-based architecture. There's also a difference between what's business and consumer IAM is. It's a different issue when you create a Gmail account. I don't know if Google employees, for example, have used their Gmail account to log into the payroll system or to the benefit system, but those are different. I mean, consumer-based IAM is also about creating accounts in public sites. It's mostly API-driven. It can be outsourced, like social login. But federation is needed and useful. And a problem with consumer IAM is that many identities are created in a disposable fashion. They are created just for tweeting something, or they are created for just buying a ticket. They are created for just enrolling into a mailing list. And then you get a lot of users that are created, or identities that are created, and that have to follow a process there. And there also the privacy is different, and regulations for public sites. The right to forget, for example, is if your Hi-Fi account is still active, for example. I mean, maybe you registered 10 years ago, and it's still active. Does it still has the password? Does it work? Can somebody do that with that account? So social or consumer identity is a different issue. What are some of the challenges that we have when working with an IAM process? Actually, that sometimes the business process is not ready to be automated. It's fairly ad hoc. You have special types of contracts which need to be vetted or moved or whatever. Also the scale, how many people are you hiring or offboarding or transferring each day, week, month? When you have different geographies, different locations, they have different resources. You have to provision into, that's a problem, for example, with companies that have grown by acquisition. They may have a different email system in a different office, and you have to provision into that, or even a separate Active Directory tree. Integration with legacy applications is also an issue. How are you going to integrate with applications that even run on old platforms like DOS even, or old mainframes? And also the integration into IT service delivery for ticketing, for provisioning users, for providing service to users, and for delivering even a computer to them. Some of the benefits that you get when you implement an identity and access management process is, for example, that you can make, when you standardize on a process, when you agree with the business and you implement that standard process, you actually make this flow more smoothly. Everybody knows how a user is created. Nobody's going to call you in the middle of the night to ask for this urgent renewal of a contract because the process is implemented, automated. The identity database can also provide service to other applications which, for example, require authorizations or workflows can benefit from using this to understand when a person transfers from a group, to another department. Workflow applications are impacted by transfers, for example, and an identity and access management process can provide visibility into that. It also provides a path to risk scoring to understand what accesses to what applications are more riskier than others. For example, your timesheet application is less risky than posting ledger transactions. So you can create like a risk or score for every person in the organization. You can also improve turnaround times, automation for provisioning requests, because since this is now a process that's streamlined and automated, you can create forms which automatically provision an account into the accounting system, for example. And it no longer needs somebody to work on that ticket and also go to the application and create the user. It can be automated. And it can also provide identity intelligence, like user behavior analytics about how are you going to be doing with this, because now you have a centralized identity database, data store, and you can then provide, okay, this person has not logged on for a week, yet he has a license for this application which we requested. So you can provide a lot of application and a lot of intelligence to the organization just by centralizing the identity database. Some other side benefits, and this is not like the direct benefit, but like a side benefit. This makes users productive, but also more secure by using, for example, self-service password reset, self-service access provisioning workflows, so that they can request permissions to applications. They can reset their passwords. That's something that instead of calling into the help desk to reset their password, they can do it themselves. Not only for the network or Active Directory, but they can also reset passwords for applications. You can also integrate with other provisioning processes, such as physical access badges, telephones, equipment delivery, phone, the laptop. Have you seen those people in Twitter who, oh, I'm new in this company, they gave me a t-shirt and whatever, so swag. You can deliver swag also because you then have a notification when a new user comes into the organization. And you can also impact the bottom line in the sense that now subscription-based licenses, for example, mean money. And when you deprovision a user at the right time, then you can delete and reclaim licenses that you are no longer needed. You can think of a cost of an E3/5 license or a Creative Cloud license. When you deprovision a user, automatically when the contract ends, then that means less money. You do not need to be buying incremental licenses for that. You can recycle them. And also some contract or temporary users, which the Identity and Access Management program knows, they can know not to provision those expensive licenses to those users that don't need it. Instead of going just a one-size-fits-all strategy for provisioning. There is an open source solution. It's called Keycloak. It gives you a centralized service for account provisioning and management. It also does federation to Active Directory or any LDAP directory and allows you to give to your applications an easy path into single sign-on from a centralized database. So it's a project that's supported by Red Hat, so it's being developed constantly. So what is the future roadmap for this, for identity and access management? For the process, it's actually to move from the security, to move the process, transition that identity and access management from within the security organization to its own process, its own program. And from the technology, bring your own identity. I mean, you bring the identity that you have, that's like notarization of identities, where you bring your user from another company into this company. Machine learning, also it's being implemented for permission provisioning and recertification, something that seeing anomalies, detecting anomalies into this user has a permission that not all of the persons in this role have, for example. That's something that's coming, the identity proofing or notarization. And the talk that was here before, IoT device identity, validating that also devices have identities and onboarding them into the network, giving them access. So, thank you. I hope that you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you for coming, and I don't know if we have time for some questions.
Thank you, Egdares. Do we have any questions?
You can tell us about Keycloak.
Hi. If you can tell us a bit more about Keycloak, this open source that you commented on.
Okay, yeah, Keycloak is an open source package. It's very powerful in the sense that you can implement it in. It's got a lot of connectors but mostly open source applications, and Active Directory is also one of them. It's got an API, so you can build your own connector to, for example, to a database, to a specific database that you need to provision user accesses. But it only gives you the component that allows you to create identities, centralize them, and manage them, but they don't, and of course delete them and change attributes, but it doesn't have a workflow per se or a life cycle within. So it's just because I think it's going to be developed in further new versions. They're going to implement a workflow over that. But right now, it only allows you as a repository for centralizing identities and giving you single sign-on features that you can make Keycloak act as a proxy for your application, so you don't need to develop any identity features, but you can just hook on to what Keycloak gives. Yeah. So it's being developed.
Are there any other questions?
So I recently became aware of HashiCorp Sentinel, which is basically policy as code. It allows, with the HashiCorp products, it allows you to encode user creation policies or access policies through code itself for their underlying products like Terraform or Vault or so on, right? I don't know if Keycloak has anything like that, or do you know of any other products that basically allow you to encode your access management rules or some of your IAM rules in code itself and manage them through code?
Like a software defined, the only product I've seen is like, Terraform, that allows you to do that. So no, I don't know of any other ones. This is, but they are building something that, this is interesting, on blockchain, encoding into blockchain identities and rules. Yeah, but that's being developed, yeah. I don't know the name of the product that's doing it, sorry.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Egdares.
Thank you, thanks for coming.